Okay, let's dive right into something we've all felt. That universally frustrating experience. You've been there, right? You see a face you absolutely know, you can almost feel their name in your mind, but poof, it's just gone. Well, you should know it is not just you. Forgetting names is actually one of the most common memory complaints people have, bar none.
So in this explainer, we're going to get to the bottom of why this happens so often. And here's the spoiler. The answer isn't that you just have a bad memory. What we're going to see is that forgetting a name is often a predictable, almost logical outcome of how our brains are wired. You could almost say it's a feature, not a bug.
All right, first things first, let's examine the crime scene, so to speak. That maddening moment where your brain just stalls out. It's that feeling scientists call the tip of the tongue state.
Now this is really important. This isn't just plain old forgetting. No, it's a very specific kind of memory blip where you have this powerful feeling of knowing. You can often remember things about the name, right? Like, oh, I know it starts with a B, or I think it has 3 syllables. But the actual sound of the name itself just won't come. You know the information is in there somewhere, but the access door feels temporarily jammed shut.
And what's really wild is just how often this happens. You know, for younger adults, this little brain freeze happens maybe once a week. But look at this. As we get older, that frequency can just skyrocket. For many older adults, it can happen nearly every single day. So that tells us that whatever is going on here, it's a process that definitely changes as we move through life.
So what is it about names? Why are they so incredibly slippery? Well, let's investigate our first and most important suspect, the name itself. This comparison really gets to the heart of the problem. Okay, think about the word baker. Your brain instantly lights up a whole network of ideas. Bread, flour, big white hats, the smell of an oven. It's packed with meaning. But what about the last name Baker? Well, it has none of that. It's basically just an arbitrary sound, a label that's only connected to one specific person. It doesn't have that rich web of connections that helps anchor other words in our memory.
And that's the crucial point. Your brain has a much harder time storing these completely random, standalone labels. I mean, think about it. If you learn someone is a firefighter, that information slots right into a whole category you already have in your mind. But if you learn their name is John, well, the name John doesn't give you any clues about what he looks like or what he does. Your brain has to build that connection completely from scratch, with almost no mental hooks to hang it on.
And this whole problem gets 100 times worse during introductions. A lot of the time, the name never even gets properly stored to begin with. First, there's something called the next in line effect. That's where you're so busy thinking about what you're going to say that you don't even really hear the name of the person right before you. On top of that, you've got this massive cognitive overload. You're trying to listen, make eye contact, think of a question, smile, maybe shake hands, all in a noisy room. Your attention is split a dozen ways, and the name just gets lost in the shuffle.
So, let's peel back the layers and get into the neuroscience of it all. Forgetting a name isn't just one thing happening in one spot in your brain. It's actually a potential failure anywhere along a highly specialized naming network. Now, for anyone interested in biology, this is where it gets really cool. Successfully remembering a name isn't a one-man show. It takes a perfectly coordinated effort between at least 3 key brain regions, and each one has a very specific job to do. If there's even a tiny hiccup anywhere in this chain, the whole retrieval process can fail. So let's break down what each part does.
Okay, first up, the left temporal pole. The best way to think about this is like your brain's super specialized Rolodex or address book. Brain imaging shows us that this area is absolutely crucial for pulling up the specific words for unique things, like people's names or famous landmarks. It's the hub that connects the idea of a person to the specific sound of their name. In fact, damage to this one area can cause a condition where a person can describe someone perfectly, their job, their family, everything, but they just cannot produce the name.
Next in the chain is the hippocampus. This part acts like the brain's master glue stick or its context binder. Its whole job is to take the name, the item, and bind it to the context, the face, the party where you met, the conversation you had. This binding process is the critical step that creates a complete memory. If this step fails, you end up with that weird feeling where you remember a face but have no name, or you hear a name but can't picture the person it belongs to.
And finally, when a name doesn't just pop into your head, your frontal lobes have to jump into action. This region is like your brain's very own search engine. It launches a conscious, effortful, top-down search to hunt down and retrieve that name from your long-term memory. You know that feeling of mentally racking your brain, digging through files in your head? Yeah, that's your frontal lobes doing all the heavy lifting, trying to find the path back to that name.
Okay, so now we know how this delicate system is supposed to work. Let's look at two common culprits that actively sabotage the whole process: stress and not getting enough sleep.
Blanking on a name when you're put on the spot isn't just you being nervous. It's a direct, physical, biological response. When you get stressed out, your body's HPA axis floods your brain with the stress hormone cortisol, and studies show that high levels of cortisol directly interfere with the function of your prefrontal cortex, your brain's search engine. Basically, those stress hormones act like a neural roadblock, stopping your frontal lobes from doing their job and finding the name.
And get this, the brain-blocking effects of cortisol aren't just for a second. They can stick around long after you've calmed down. This is the exact reason why you might suddenly remember that person's name an hour later when you're relaxed and driving home. It's not that the memory was gone, it's just that the hormonal blocker has finally cleared out, and your brain's search engine could finally complete its search.
Now, sleep deprivation attacks a totally different part of the network. A lack of sleep has been shown to seriously weaken the hippocampus. Remember, that's our context binder. This leads to what scientists call binding failures when you're trying to make a new memory. So if you meet someone when you're exhausted, your brain might store their face, but it literally struggles to form the connection, to bind that face to their name. You're left with just a piece of the memory, not the whole picture.
All right, let's briefly look at the repeat offender in this whole story, the natural process of aging, and why these little memory slips seem to get more and more common over time.
The evidence here is pretty clear. As we saw earlier, going from a tip-of-the-tongue moment once a week to nearly every day is a huge jump. But, and this is really important, it doesn't mean the memories themselves have vanished. So what's really going on? Well, for most healthy older adults, the main issue is with the retrieval process. The name is still in there, tucked away in the temporal pole, but the search mechanism, the frontal lobes, just isn't as zippy as it used to be. The pathways that connect your desire to remember with the memory itself get a little weaker, which makes that effortful search a lot harder and more likely to come up empty.
Okay, let's bring our investigation to a close with one final thought, a verdict that might just change how you think about this whole thing. Forgetting a name can really feel like a personal failure, but maybe, just maybe, we're measuring the wrong thing.
When you get right down to it, our brains are wired for social survival. They prioritize the stuff that is most meaningful for getting by in a complex social world. Things like the emotional vibe of an interaction, a feeling of trust, the gut feeling you get from someone. That's the stuff that sticks. It's retained way more strongly than some arbitrary, meaningless label. So the next time you forget a name, maybe it's not a memory lapse at all. Maybe it's just proof that your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do, prioritizing the connection over the label.